Or
There we go.
there we go. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the regular meeting in the program committee to order. It is Wednesday, March 19th at 7:03 p.m.
Thank you, sir.
Members present are Peter Bacon. Thank you, everyone. Jennifer McHugh, Scott Summers, myself, James Marshall, Donald Hendricks, Jeremy Brothers, Suka, Peter Tanaka, and we have Melissa McKinnon joining us remotely tonight. So members absent are Christina Milos and Christina Milos. That's it. That's it. Who is on vacation? I want to go on. So with that said, first
Also,
up,
you have Swedish relatives, you know.
So with that said, first up is present to speak. There's nobody in the room, and so go online. If there's anybody online, please identify yourself for the record and feel free to make a comment. Hearing none, we'll move on to approval of minutes.
Move to approve.
Approval minutes for March 12th, 2025. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
All right, Peter Tanaka moved it, Peter Bacon second. Any discussion?
Outstanding as usual.
Yeah, we were talking about notes that everybody was making, they're all in here, I think.
Yeah, you captured well.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that everybody? Anybody opposed? No abstentions, no. Motion unanimous. They're approved. Next up is chair report. I will keep this brief. I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. I think we're pretty close and in good shape to approve a plan. At least our first best pass at our plan tonight. So thank you, everybody, for working so hard on what a relatively abbreviated schedule this year. And really, I think doing the best we can on a challenging capital improvement. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you as well. Yeah.
Oh, the only other thing to mention, we are slated to present, we are on the agenda tomorrow night for Board of Finance. So we will talk about that a little later in your business, just what our goals and objectives are in the defensive plan. So with that said, next up, outreach. You should all have in your packets, I didn't check to see if it made it. Follow-up discussion from the letter, the initial outreach that Superintendent Stevens had made. Within here?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
thank you. Let's ditch on my minutes. Just about, I followed up asking for a sense of timing with that new, with the regulation that's potentially before legislature today, or for this year. So I don't think there's any changes based on what he said from what we have captured in the plan. You know, the earliest projects, I think approval would be in the summer of 2027 for his correction.
I think it said July 2026. Be honorable before June 30th, 2026
For the
grant application.
but
Yeah,
the
the
formal approval
right.
until the following
Right.
year. And then the 18-month window is a question, so
Yeah, when does that start? When does it open? When does
whether
it
it starts
close?
at the grant application approval or whether it starts at the actual approval, that
Yeah.
submission window opening and the approval, so. With a little luck, we'll have better insight in 3 months. So again, good juju. All right. Next up is old business, which is just our plan discussion. And I'll start, I think basically probably a good idea, since we did make a lot of changes at the last meeting, to just give a brief recap. That's what you see in the printouts before you. First thing to note there were no changes beyond making sure calculations and everything, updating the fund balance summary after our meeting. So if any of you have seen anything that looks different than discussed, now would be the time to bring it up as we discuss it tonight. The big formatting things, I managed to get this all on one page, for the most part, that all of the projects, which is wonderful. If it's a little smaller, I know it's worth it. Page 2 is basically the fund balance, is the expenditures per account. Row 68 is the same. Row 69, excuse me, is the same on both pages. That's the total of all projects. And then you have it broken out by fund. So this felt fairly clean. And then as discussed, oops, sorry, 2 more pages. One is the fund balance summary. This should be done. I didn't get any feedback from you. So I assume we didn't see anything, but to the best of my knowledge, this is accurately reflecting everything as we captured at our last meeting, for projects placing holds on funds in each given year. And then the last page you have is just the extrapolation of the remaining projected projects on a simplified list. Given that these are 5 years out, I did take a stab at slapping some escalation rates as if they were hitting in year 6, just to give a submitted and a potential projected analysis. But we kept it as simple and clean as that, and this can be a running list. It's really just base projects currently. The big ticket items that we're aware of, I didn't capture, there's probably another 10 pieces of equipment on public works that falls in that 5-year window that is not there. But these are some of the big ticket items, including a balance for Schofield, the remainder of the project for the Schofield Road improvements. I captured it there. We had a lot of discussion about phase 2. That's the balance of the project as submitted. If it's pushed out, just it's somewhere to capture it. All right. Let's see if we can succinctly make its changes, or identify the changes from last meeting.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to contrast and compare because everything's on different lines.
Correct, yeah, so I'll walk through the current version of the sheet, to the best of my recollection, and so for Board of Ed, lines 8 and 9 are the 2 projects, are the 79.54% reimbursement project. We captured that as a note in year 3. And
which project is which?
they're the same.
All right,
I split out, one is a line for the note, similar to what we did down below.
got it. No, I understand now. Thank you. I didn't read all the words.
Yep, so the line 8 is the note that hits in year 3. That is the best guess based on the extrapolated data from the December bond summary, along the lines of what we've been doing for all of this.
Can I just ask something?
Sure.
Does Melissa see this or can you?
Melissa, do you have, that's a good question, Melissa.
I sure do. I picked it up today. I always pick them up usually before the meeting, so I have it.
You're right on it.
Beautiful.
I just want to be sure.
Yes, thank you for thinking of me, Steph.
Thanks, Steph. Yes, and feel free, Melissa, please just jump in. Don't raise your hand if you have a comment, because we don't always see the screen. Yeah, so year 4, line 9 is where the bond hits in year 4. You'll also note in year 4, we dropped the annual transfer in line 4 to 0. Because that is where the bond hits. So you'll see that drop off in years 4 and 5. As was the plan and the intent behind the shock absorber. As we discuss it later on, you'll see it makes a very notable impact in the total local spending impact in the year the bond hits. So it's an effective strategy to just try to mitigate some of that burden. That's all I recall.
Capital spending and capital savings.
Right. Nothing changed on, that I recall, on the emergency services facilities building committee lines, those stay the same. We have both the note payment and that additional request for funding happening in year 2 concurrently currently. Oh God, sorry for that alliteration.
Sounds like you got stuck.
I know.
Currently concurrent.
We slept that. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. EMS, what did we do there? Sorry, give me a second to refresh my memory. It was basically, we changed some. No, we didn't change anything on that, that I recall. I just checked my notes. You don't have. Beyond, oh, the big changes on EMS, I'm sorry, year 3 and year 4, line 24. We had discussed taking that $1.2 million equipment purchase. We've captured $600,000 as a direct payment from Fund 17 in year 3. And then the balance is picked up as a lease obligation from Fund 17 in years 4 and beyond. Those are the updated numbers. And if I'm correct, all this correctly. Fund 17, even after that hit, still has $200,000 in it according to these projections. So it does have a healthy enough. It has a balance still, which is helpful. This will obviously be subject to change as the years go on, but I think that was an effective strategy personally. Yeah, nothing else in the EMS lines. The only things up there, they're still highlighted on your sheet lines 18 and 19. And we can discuss it as we get into fund balance transfer or fund transfers later.
So that you took out, the projected ones? Okay.
Correct. Those sit on your.
To keep it on one page,
Keep
yeah.
them. These are all the things we're tracking.
Oh,
but
that's on that nifty
That's
third
on that
page, okay.
nifty third page, those
Yeah,
3
thank
pieces. Fourth page, you number them however you like. Public Works. The first change in year 1 was the roadside mower we covered in out of Fund 04 instead of leasing that. For the final 150. What else happened to Public Works? We pushed out,
Roadside mower.
the roadside mower is year 1, we didn't push it out.
Right.
It's just not a lease anymore. It becomes a,
Direct payment.
it's a direct pay from fund balance, so we don't. Just handle differently. We pushed out to year 4, the Liska Road Bridge Culverts project. That is now in year 4 and shown as a fund, as a capital fund project for Fund 04. You'll see that the next line 41, is the start of the lease payments, or the bond payments rather, for that $2 million project. We're a few years out from now. I think that's, we can discuss that in more detail if you guys see fit. And then the only other change there, Schofield, you'll see, is still in year 2. It is now a Fund 04. It's coming from capital reserve rather than a direct taxpayer hit, which is great. And then we're only capturing as phase 1 that remaining balance of the $1,250,000 from the urban action grant. We also, Pete, I think you had left when we got to this, but the propane heaters.
Yeah,
In year 2 are now a low SIP project.
okay.
And we did something else in year 2. Oh, the stormwater treatment container, the public works in year 1. That might have already been enough fund.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah, we took something out of here. What was it?
Schofield's in year 2, right?
Schofield did the engineering's in year 2, the actual project is
Project's
year
in.
3.
Okay. Gotcha.
So we're taking something out,
Let's see,
And some of the library projects come out of those one too.
yeah, we transferred stuff and I just don't remember. What I'm trying to get at Pete, is your local spending total came down like 17 grand or 13 grand. Which is.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah,
But there's really-
I wanna get to that when you get done with this
Yeah.
review.
So that's more or less it for public works. We. Adjusted the library project, I don't think we adjusted them, they're all covered as a low SIP.
In year
Across the
2.
various years 1 through 4, where they.
Wait a minute, I went in the wrong line, sorry.
Yeah, lines 46 through 50,
Yeah,
they're all flagged to low SIP and the fund balance is healthy enough to cover it.
is that what you're talking about, taking out that 17,000 for a few years running for the
Oh, that's the difference.
That's what,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that hit, so we paid at a capital fund, so instead of a $17,000 lease for 7 years, um. It's a $17,000 reduction
for the assessor,
for the mower,
oh,
the mower that we paid for, we decided to pay for that out of pocket, out of Fund 04. Rather than flag it as a lease to 311. Open space fund, assessor, land use, none of those changed, senior center. The only changes there were lines 65 and 66, we were able to cover with low SIP based on the projected balances. And I am going to confirm that based on how that all worked out, we don't go below $37,000 in loan SIP, which is good. As this is currently scheduled, we don't have available funding for additional projects in the out years yet. Or sorry, we can't quite cover anything in year 3 out of low SIP of the projects that are available. We probably have additional, some minor projects in years 4 and 5, but we don't have any committed that low SIP would be able to cover because it's a future conservative. Because that balance speeds up and we have nothing for years 4 and 5. So
what is I'm trying to track the senior center bus.
It's on the very bottom.
the
line
bus is
67.
67. It's year 4. And it's a bus, so it had to come from Fund 04.
I'm glad that it's pushed out a couple years. After hearing from, Phil about some of the transportation problems the school's having. I think that we could work a deal there. I also wanna dig further into what, WRTD. I knew something like that can do for us so that maybe we don't need a bus. I think if they're making less than 15 trips a year, it may be a considerably cheaper to lease than to buy. Or to rent, or, a contract. Buying the vehicle is expensive, keeping it up is expensive, keeping drivers licensed and insured is expensive, so. If they're making less than 15 trips a year, then. If they're making like a trip a week, I can see it.
Yeah, and as our both piece of library and the senior center, there is preliminary and developed as we all heard them being.
Right.
With a little luck, we'll, I think they're coming around to the process.
That and-
hopefully we'll have a little further
Yeah,
development.
and I think the library is too. I think the library is coming around to how projects are done. But I know that the Board of Ed is having problems with some transportation issues with students that are town residents that aren't currently in town that we have to pick up. I understand Ashford's having the same problem, and I'm not sure whether they're all coming down in one place, but maybe we could work. Instead of sending 2 buses out there, sending one, I don't know where they're going. I don't need to know that. the state says I can't go that.
So beyond that, what you'll see is when you get down to page 2, where you get all the totals, what we see is, well, a couple of big things to note, basically. First is that local spending does stay relatively flat, years 1 and year 2 at the elevated total. Coming in around 2.3 million, line 77. In year 2, that is just about at what the local spending target would be for year 2. As based on a 10% increase target, which was, the prior committed goal. The big jump happens when the bond for the fire station hits in year 3. That is the bulk of the balance there. And unfortunately, there is no fund balance to pay that down. So that is about a $1.3 million net change in local spending when that bond hits. And then in year 4, you'll see the impact of is that the note for the school? No, that's the bond for the school in year 4. Only a $300,000 increase in local spending as we currently have this laid out now. That's just the net, but the $1 million reduction in saving for local spending really makes that not even a mil hit. Across years 4 and 5, it's about $1 million for the bond, picking up the bond payment for the school. And there's about, when that hits, the balance of the school project is about $4.5 million. Based on the way we have the transfers happening currently, which the town can decide to figure out how to utilize that, whether it's to down pay the bond payment, whether it's to reduce the payment gradually over the first 7 years of the loan at $400,000 or $500,000 to not have an impact, but for if all goes as projected here, I think that's about as effective a scenario as we can get given the time that we have and the level of spending we've captured. I would love to personally see that. Ideally, what we want to see is a gradual increase in local spending, so that it's not a big shock like that year 2 to year 3 jump. I'd want to be able to distribute that by paying it forward a little bit so we can cut that down, but these are the larger discussions that I don't know whether we're gonna get all the answers to, and
I think that by May 8th, we're gonna get a lot more feedback from the town. Can I say a few things that
does anybody have did anybody see anything that I said that looked off from what we discussed?
No.
I did it on the fly, and a lot of moving numbers.
Yeah, I believe that there were, and believe me, I appreciate the amount of work you put into that spreadsheet, because I would have gone off the deep end. And I know that, but looking at the 6-year history of CIP, 2021, we were vastly underfunded. We spent $554,000 total. This year, we have a $544,000 total. This year, we have a $537,000 increase, which is a 30.7% increase over last year. I know that there's some doubt in people's mind on what my feeling is on what kind of budget increase the town will take. So I've been surveying some of the people that have been involved in town politics for a long time, like Mike McCool and Bob Shabbat and others. The general feeling I'm getting is around 5%. And that's from people who would really like to see our schools built and et cetera. I mean, people that understand that town spending is necessary. The other side of the coin is much lower than that, and I think that that's probably unrealistic with the inflation and our needs. I'm guessing 5% is pushing the limit of what this town will buy. And year over year, that number would come to $267,000 for everything. Everything, that's half of what we have for an increase in CIP alone. Which may be an issue. So. The thought that I had was, now we need to balance. Savings for future, which is important. Don't get me wrong, I believe you that it's important. And operations, which I also believe is important. Right now, the current budget as written is 19.5%.
I think the operating budget, correct me if I'm wrong, is about 10%, I would get somewhere in the 8 to 10% range of that.
Well, the overall increase is $1,042,000.
And CIP is only 500,000.
Right, so it's about half and half.
Yeah.
Half of the increases in operating, half the increases in CIP.
So,
I don't know what to do. So I just know that. You know, as written. This isn't gonna fly. Now, I was lectured severely last Monday that it's up to me to tell the Board of Finance what the budget is, and I am in disagreement with that after reading the state law all day. The Board of Finance is in charge of finances, and the Board of Selectmen is the. I think it's Connecticut General Statute 7338 or 238, something like that. So what I do is I still, despite the lecture, believe that I need to present what I think needs to be done for operations and savings and CIP and all that, and the Board of Finance is the representatives of the town population, the legislative body. So, but I think that unfortunately, I think the savings is gonna have to take a hit some this year. Because this just isn't happening.
Can I respond to?
yeah, sure.
Cause you put a lot out there, but you're giving really good context for, what's going on. I think the thing that we have to decide as a part of this budgeting process is how serious are we about catching up on the capital?
Mm-hmm.
And that is easily gonna mean like no growth in positions during that time frame, things like that are, no one's questioning the need that the department heads are telling you about. But on the other hand, growing the employee base
Right.
is not the wisest thing to do
No,
when you've got the problems we have.
And
So I think that one of the things is sort of a philosophical choice that we've never really faced up to before. You've shown more interest in trying to figure this out, in my opinion. And I think this committee has shown a lot of interest in trying to take some giant steps to figure it out and not just kind of file it away, do our thing, and then come back to it in 3 years from now or whenever, especially with the escalation happening the way it's happening. That, to me, that's pretty scary. Some of the tariff-driven stuff, some of the other things that are happening. It's just almost waiting and being passive about it, which we've done for many years, since I've been on CIP, I've seen that. It's in our way now. I think as far as your philosophy about statutes and whose responsibility is the budget, it's true that the Board of Finance is sort of the financial stopping point and signing off point and policy guys and everything else. But I would say the thing that the CEO of the town, you and other department heads need to do is have those tough discussions up front about, is this budget growing, why is this budget growing to this degree? Can it happen now? I know you did some of that last year, but before it reaches the Board of Finance, because otherwise it's just is the Board of Finance just being
Well-
the heavies in all this, you
Right,
know?
no,
So, and you know.
and I have more here when,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
cut
that's
you
all
off.
right. I wanted you, I take things in small bits better.
Okay, well, philosophically, I think there's a stage where like the selectmen are looking at their budget, it's coming in at 19%, and sure about half of that is this capital. You know, big boulder we're talking about, but the rest of it is growth in the operating, and so, you know, and some of it's mandated stuff at the federal level. That you've got to address, so that stuff I don't think we can, I think we can run, but we can't hide, you know? But some of the other things are choices that we're making, and like, you know, you and I've talked, or we've talked at this board. If we're finally tackling some of the big things with some help from some state aid and everything else, like Schofield, Village Hill, some of those big ones, I feel like that sort of offsets maybe doing as much locally as we wanna do. So, and you know, maybe it's not the year to try to amp up the local roads budget.
And that's part of exactly what I'm gonna get to.
Okay, good. Well, anyway, that's the kind of thing that could be before you come to Board of Finance.
Right, and I think that I'm gonna be coming to the Board of Finance tomorrow night and explaining some of this to them.
Okay,
So we looked at, I asked you to find the cost of the
Yes,
0.6 position with
Yes. with benefits,
benefits,
yes.
and what did that come to? Because I left before you told me.
I would not calculate it, but
Okay, that's something that, so what I did was at 5%, that's an increase in the total budget of $267,000. I would like to see, we took a bump in FY 23-24 to CIP of 191%. That's a little above the 10% increase we were looking for.
Yeah, it was purposeful.
Yeah, no, it was purposeful, but once you take a bump that big, then you gotta, it's kind of like the snake, you gotta pass it through the system a little before you take another big bump, you know what I'm saying?
Decrease last year,
What?
we got a reduction last year.
Yeah, of 1.7%.
I get that.
And so what I'd like to see is is at least an increase this year over last year of 4%. Minimum.
Do we have a dollar value for what?
The dollar value of that $70,000. So
Well,
that would bring us up to $1,819,603, which means that we gotta find $467,000 approximately.
so I'm gonna,
That would be, and I'm not saying we need to, I'm saying that's where what we have to reduce to get down to around 4%. So, and like you pointed out before, Jim, the total increase is 1,042,000, 467, about half, a little less than half. And that way we're taking some from savings and some from operation.
well, at a $460,000 reduction. You're basically taking most of the bond, most of the,
Well-
of the effort here to get the CIP.
Right,
To get
well, no.
adequate funding.
I know that, and so what I did was, what's more important, schools or fire stations? Or schools in the rest of the town building? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I took that 467,000 and divided it into half. And that would be $233,000 each, or $234,000 each from lines 3 and 4. And that brings us down right in the range. That still leaves $766,000 for the school bond issue, which is still above where, if you count the last 2 years and this year, we're still at 3-point-something million. We're still over $3 million when we were planning for a shock absorber of $1 million a year. We're still ahead of our original estimates.
Yeah,
And we're slightly behind on the rest of the town buildings, we'd be down to 566,000, which is still more than we put in last year. And I'm looking to put in more than last year. I just don't know if we can swallow that big an egg. All right, and that would be my suggestion, and then I'd have to find the rest of it from my operating budget. And that's why I've asked Donna to look at that 0.6 person. We completely wipe out the DPW, road maintenance, asphalt and maybe the chip seal, and we're getting close.
Wiping out the growth.
Just wiping out the growth,
It's
yes.
still got a lot
Right,
in there.
right.
Yeah,
Wiping out the growth. I do not wanna wipe out the tree increase because we're gonna get hammered with that.
Yeah, there's a ton of ash.
That all the ash trees in town are dead.
Right.
I can hear them exploding around my house during the last couple windstorms.
Yeah.
Luckily, they all went through the neighbor's fence instead of mine.
We could hear a transformer explode right away.
Yes.
Well done.
The lines are still done.
Yeah, so,
But that would be where I'd go to get around 5%, and even at 5%, I think. I mean,
So-
for years, I wanted to go below 5%, and I was probably closer to the camp of 3, but we can't do that in this economy. We cannot do that. However, if we go much above, if we go above 5, we'll probably be going to a second referendum and figuring out where to slash this stuff the second time around. That's my only concern, and I know that these numbers are important, but even at a 10% increase over last year, we're still above that according to lines.
we are,
These lines over here, you know,
we are, yeah.
we're at
It's
19%,
not
so.
about- It's, yeah, it's double with 10%. Year over year, but again, it was 0 growth last year.
Yeah,
What I will say, yeah, and those are all valid concerns, they're good points. What I will say, I personally, as long as we see some meaningful growth, I don't necessarily. It doesn't matter to me as much where the transfers happen. But meaningful growth is not 4%, it is not 5%. And it can't be, and that's the problem, and you know, I've harped on it a lot this season about needing to divorce the reality of this larger financial planning for capital projects need from the budgetary, the operating budget percentiles and targets, because this is an animal and kind of a planning mechanism all in itself to get ahead of all of these things.
I understand that, but the reality is that the CIP plan is voted on in referendum with the operations plan, and I would love to get an ordinance where we vote on them separately, so that we could sell these projects and see where the town is on buying them, but when you got that big nut, it's just, you know, we've got 5,000 people in town, you raise taxes by $1 million per head, that's a lot of money.
So the only other thought I had, and this was a thought even before any of that, but it's very relevant. Is based on all the changes, so most of we have a lot of spending in year 2, and they're $500,000 per square field. They're the animal control facility, which may or may not happen.
Right.
My money's on, we should plan for it, because there's gonna be something there. And the other item on that is $200,000 for the emergency services building committee, those are all
Yes.
Fund 04 projects.
Yes.
Like 1.132 million.
And
We are currently, with the transfer we have in here at 800,000 now, $30,000 shy of covering that. And we don't have much wiggle room beyond reducing a year 2 project. And those, I think both Schofield personally and the animal control is something that we're gonna have to deal with. So that really leaves one project, which is the 200,000 for the emergency services facilities building committee. Which would allow us to reduce $170,000 out of the transfer this year. And still cover all of the expected transfers from Fund 04 next year. The other opportunity, or the other option, is look back. And there's 110,000 that we've talked about, that Stu brought up last meeting again. For lines 18 and 19, the survey for Old Farms and the design and engineering for the Old Farms project that isn't a project yet. That if it were closed out, would give us a $70,000 dollar reduction in year one spending. Beyond that, I think, and those are debatable. I'm saying those are what I see as the two avenues for getting reductions in scope that allow us to fund year two projects that we have currently. But I mean, combined, that's $270,000 right there. That could be positive balance to Fund 04, which could reduce the burden in the transfer this year.
Mhm.
I throw a couple suggestions,
Please.
and again, just my personal opinion, but I'm here to voice it. Line 20, the parking lot replacement for Wellington Hill. Where they have 35,000 already set aside this year and 65 you're asking for next year. Given the uncertainty of what's gonna happen with that property. Won't know till after this budget season where it's going. But the primary problem with that parking lot is if you walked up there, the septic tank cover, which is probably a 4x8 big concrete cover, the ground settled around it, so it sticks up, so the plows can't get over it, and it's a problem. However, the rest of the parking lot is probably no worse than Hall School or this building here. With the 35,000, can they fix, patch, do whatever they have to in that side of the building and let it ride till they find out what's going on with that property? Just as the schools held off for years doing some projects based on their uncertainty of what's going on. I think that same would apply there.
So my only thought on that, and we talked about it, I think previously, is it's gotta last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's gotta last at least 4 or 5 years.
Because that's how long it's gonna take for any meaningful project.
Well, I'm not saying go out there with a shovel, but,
No, I know.
for 35,000, I think you can afford a backhoe or if the town crew come and do it, they've done other paving, is to, level that all out, scoop out all the bad pavement and repave it level with the septic tank cover. The rest of the parking lots, the fire trucks are not falling into potholes in front of the firehouse.
I'm not gonna lie, I hate spending any money on buildings that are unknowns personally. It's the same, the other elephant in the room is the roof project for the schools, which we still have captured on here as a tight up balance in the school fund. That's another one of those things where the reality is we're gonna be on the hook for it, I think, on top of whatever the school project is, which is why I think it's still holding. It's also important to the town. But there's a good chance, and that is, your fund balances do show that as a reimbursed roof project. It may not be reimbursable if the building is no longer schools.
Correct.
So that becomes a $2 million rather than a $750,000 hit.
The other idea I had was the mower for public works, convert that back into a lease.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
It's.
That
you-
actually adds to the balance rather than take, oh, I get what you're saying.
We'll drop that first year payment from, 103 to about $17,000.
It could reduce Fund 04.
No, in the long run, is it the wisest thing? No, you're paying interest on that.
And that also adds to the operating budget.
But if we need to cut that budget from 19% of wherever we're at down, that's an option to do that.
Pete, I don't know what the full impact of leasing is on your operating, but that's all ground into your lines, so. That's part of the growth in your budget, and to me, that's something that's got a little bit of a stranglehold. I'll bring up another elephant in the room, and is this a time to, I know that we have a replacement planned and everything, but there's definitely discussion and dispute over whether the town at this time needs and can afford 2 ambulances. So that,
Please describe the savings on getting rid of an ambulance.
They're both paid for right now, right?
well, we have it in the plan.
The one that's gonna be
It's
coming
not
back.
paid
from
for
refurb-
yet, it's,
The one that's coming back from refurb will be on a lease.
yeah, it'll be.
The other one's all paid for. So what is the operational savings for getting rid of the second ambulance?
Well,
Minus-
it's paid
minus-
for now, but it's in the plan for,
No,
I mean, we've talked about it for
No, it's not in
replacement.
the 5-year plan at all.
But it is in the lease, the plan,
That's the
The
goal.
lease is the one that's coming back from refurb within a few months.
Yeah.
I
The
understand,
second ambulance is completely paid
understand.
for, and it's not in the 5-year plan.
So if it dies, it dies.
So it's not.
And the other side of it is when one ambulance, even the new one, is out for service, we don't lose any revenue.
Well, I know we've talked about that before, but we've done other things before to backfill, and I think it's,
We borrowed ambulance.
just a second, Stu, you know, to say that you need a full ambulance for the times when the ambulance is in the shop or breaks down, instead of what we've done before, which is take advantage of some mutual aid opportunities, and in the, you know, off-track season, we've gotten help from Stafford because they don't need their third ambulance when the track's closed. They have to have it parked there all the time when the track's open, those kinds of things. It just feels to me like it's part of the stress on the planning.
It's not in the plan.
Well, it is, as far
Where in
as
the
being
spreadsheet is the expense for the second ambulance?
why don't we use the second ambulance for, instead of, and push out the replacing the other one?
I think this is a 2011, it's rather old and stuff to type.
Yeah,
And is it gonna die in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Who knows?
right, I
And
know
that-
it's.
and at that point, That's when we come-
Projecting on
That's when we
everything.
come back to CIP and Board of Finance and the selectmen and say, what do you wanna do? And-
But you know, we did some things in ARPA where, you know, other things in the budget too,
Mhm.
where we added positions, now we're, you know, those are plowed in. That's budget growth, having 2 ambulances instead of 1, that's budget growth. In the long run, it is, and just, you know, the idea of maintaining housing, keeping it, you know, at a time when we don't really have a way to house 2 ambulances. It's just, that's part of the growth that we're talking about. And it's like, yes, it's like, I understand why it's wanted and why, you know, that kind of growth is appealing to, you know, to a lot of people, but you know, I just think that we have to look at everything if we're talking about carving into everything that we've got in the plan for the first year and stuff.
But considering that the second ambulance is not on the plan, I don't think it's up for discussion tonight in an effort to try to reduce the CIP budget.
Yeah, that ambulance.
I think
would be
it-
approved.
I think it's
Yeah,
not that's the first one.
the first one,
Yeah.
correct, we don't have a second.
No, the second one, yeah.
I would agree with you, Stan. I mean, other people can, I'm trying to.
I
talk
just
less.
think it's a good time to talk about it, because what we do is we move forward in the off months of the year, and then all of a sudden we have this growth that really no one can really change the momentum of the monster going through, so, you know.
I do think that's something that the emergency services facility building committee and their study will hopefully.
So we'll arrive at,
We'll be evaluating versus what we can afford to house.
but again, you
the
know,
Equipment needs, I think is a part of that.
yeah, because
Comprehensive
yeah,
effort.
and that maybe there's some economies of scale with the equipment, because, you know. That again, if you're building a house, some of your operating stuff and the things that you normally do, you have to kind of put aside, and everybody wants to build a house right now. So, you know what I mean? I mean, that's
Um,
what I see anyway.
that's a
I don't
part-
know.
that's a- that's
I may
a-
not be
statement, right?
proposing the
Yes.
perfect solution, I just think it's part of the stress on it.
Yeah, line 15 is committed, it's already been approved, it's really, that's the existing. lease.
Yeah, okay,
And even if we change anything, it would be a fund 17, so it's not helping our general fund, given that we don't have a second ambulance in this plan. And we're not even projecting it in a 10-year, in the out year capture, because it was relayed pretty clearly that way, that was not currently being considered for replacement. I don't think we can do within this plan on it.
so Jim, were you suggesting taking both 200,000 out for for emergency services and the 110,000 from Wellington Hill alone there?
I'm suggesting both our options for reducing the year 2 spending from fund for the burden.
I just wanted to say that Chief Snyder is on the Board of Finance agenda for tomorrow. For a fund transfer request.
Yeah, do you know? Does anybody know what that's about? I
Yes.
saw that too.
Yes, he wants to transfer $35,000 out of operating into a capital project, so he doesn't lose it.
The parking lot replacement.
Yeah, 35 is the use it or lose it.
Thank you, thank you. I meant to ask that myself. So that's related to the 35,000 and then the 65,000 in year one
And
continuation.
I like the conversation about year two, but what we generally do in town is approve year one separately from the rest of the plan. Why? I have no philosophical bent on why that happens, other than that's the way we've always done it, which is the worst reason on the planet, but that's the way we've always done it.
Well, it's because it's easy
It'd
to
be-
say, oh, we'll do it next year.
Yeah,
We've had, what,
that
40
and-
years of saying we'll
and
do it
this
next year.
year one is
Yeah.
what we're actually gonna ask people to pay for, and year two may change. So we approve a plan, we don't approve this, approve it as spending.
We're not approving spending.
No,
We're approving
no.
the plan.
We're approving a plan, yes,
Year one, so.
and Board of Finance approves spending.
I'm gonna strongly push that this is a comprehensive plan and that the methodology should be that we're approving a plan in our best effort at debating these things, rather than separate year one, year two, year five approval. It makes no sense, and it's part
Right,
of.
but I believe the spending for year one is approved by the Board of Finance for this budget. Separately from,
Correct, but we're not approving.
Right.
We're not approving.
we're not approving any spending.
Our vote to approve year one makes no difference whether
Right.
it's year one or year two, years 1 through 5.
All right,
But
I saw that people just had his hand up. Are you taking information now or waiting to the end?
I'd like to kind of get through some of this a little bit.
All right,
If we can. No offense, Pete, but there will be time, but we haven't actually done anything yet, so, Pete's looking. So. This dovetails a little bit with what I'm gonna say later, ultimately, I'm gonna have to present this to the Board of Finance tomorrow, and be able to defend the plan that we put forth. And as part of our later discussion, I'm gonna ask you guys, how do we feel about what are the talking points, meaning. I want to be comfortable that we're approving a plan that we feel adequately serves the needs of we see fit. But we also need to be cognizant that we need to be as efficient and sensitive as we can be.
But I just wanna be sure I understand what you're suggesting, Pete. Really, you're suggesting taking all the year one spending out, essentially, the growth in it. The 566,000, right? Split into over 2 years. Is that what you're saying?
no,
He's saying pull $460,000 out of it. 460, you give us.
468,000. Pull 468,000 out of it, and that brings us down to 4%. Now,
Which.
I understand you think 10% is more likely, but
Well, that's why I talked about it's not a percentage. I mean, it's, we have a certain amount that we're projecting for year two.
Yeah.
I think if this committee feels that year two, these projects are really year two projects, then we need to fund them. And 800,000 or around that, without any other changes to what we're spending in a capital reserve is what it takes. And there's really, I don't see much fluff in here beyond that.
Well, I don't see any fluff in the plan. I don't see any fluff at all in the plan, none.
It's far from fluff.
Right, but sometimes you gotta,
I guess what I'm saying is that this is, if we're putting forth a plan that has an increase, I wanna make sure that. We're comfortable and we stand by and defend what we're looking for.
So I'll just say what my feeling is, I think you and I are of the same mind as far as we put forth a plan that we believe in and we think is the best course for the town. But then I in my own mind, run into the buzzsaw of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance not having gone through these discussions, and not you, but the Board of Finance primarily, not having gone through these discussions and the presentations and the angst of, talking about the projects and where they fit in. And seeing big targets that are easy to to hit, basically. So I feel gross when I say this, but I think that Pete, what you're talking about, while it runs contrary to what we're trying to do, it's still more than was last year. And I think in our exercise that we're gonna do on the off season, we have to figure out as a committee how to not present stuff, because I think we have that handled. It's how to interact with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to help them to understand the importance of these projects and why we're going out and why we need to fund them. And change the mentality of 1 year versus 2 through 5. Because every year we have these conversations, every single year, and I fear that we're gonna have this conversation this year as well. I don't want the plan that we've worked on to go to the Board of Finance and be chopped up. I think if we planfully know that it's going to get cut, like, I think we should do it proactively. And then work with what we have and try and figure out a strategy in the off season as to how we proceed with the budget stuff. I feel gross and horrible saying that, but I really feel like that's, I feel like it's going to happen, so if we do it.
It may still happen. Even
Yes.
If we do it.
Yes, but I think that those concessions, like those kind of, I don't know what you call it, compromises.
I don't know if I'm hearing you exactly correctly, but I think if you ask for a 4 or 5% increase rather than whatever we're at now, 19, that you have a greater chance of it getting through without getting whacked to 0. You know what I'm saying? You ask for 19, you get -1, and you ask for 4, you might get 4. That's just my guess. I don't,
So
I know,
then I posit that to you guys, what gets moved around?
well, I've made my suggestion and I don't know, I don't think it's a good suggestion,
Yeah,
but I don't think it's the worst either. It because it gives both those lines, it keeps the school savings line above the 3 million over 3 years, which is what we were projecting through. 3 million, so if you get 3 million plus a little bit, that's better, right? And then the town buildings line. What was it last year? It was
$31,000.
$31,000, which ain't squat, and
Didn't
then
do anything.
when right,
We didn't do
but
much the year before that either, which is.
no, but I'm looking at that line.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hate myself for saying this, and it's gonna come back and bite me. I'm looking at that line as kind of the shock absorber for the fire departments.
No, it needs
I'm
to.
It needs that too. So if you, what would you say, 31,000 last year? 566,000 is considerably more than 31,000. And if we could have lived, if we lived within 31,000 last year, 566,000 should be.
Keeping in mind, we didn't do anything
Yeah,
last year.
And we,
Right,
We
and we're
were,
making it harder
right,
again
And-
down the road, which is so I hear you, Pete. I think we need to put forth as a.
and but that line 4 for schools is for schools and only for schools, and that means we don't have any shock absorber for our fire
I'm not
departments.
debating, I'm not even debating that point with you.
Right.
What I'm saying is, we have a certain level of funding
Mhm.
or spending in Fund 04 that we should cover. And if we're not going to cover it, then we should either reduce spending in Fund 04, reduce the projects being covered by Fund 04. And if there's something in there in year 2, which is, let's have that discussion to figure out how to get there. I don't particularly care where the balance of money is between lines 3 and 4. I think the school, honestly, with where the school is, they're more or less kind of equal in cost. But, you know, the big ticket items, the fire station, as presented down. You know, I think we have to pay for what we have in the plan, is what I'm saying. So we are currently still 32,000 shy. 30 something thousand, 30 in that neighborhood. What can we do to reduce that? There's what projects, I said it earlier, we have 3 projects in year 2 from Fund 04, I think, right? I have a cheat sheet. Sorry, we have 5 projects that are coming out of Fund 04. We have plan of conservation development, which we can't touch. We have the reval, which we can't touch. We have the animal control upgrades, which is unknown, but we're gonna be on the hook for something. And your best guess,
Best guess,
375,000. Or whatever, 75,000. We have the Schofield Road drainage, which is grant funding,
we have to pay for that if we want the grant funding.
and then we have supplemental emergency services facilities building committee. Those are the only options to pull down or push out.
Well,
Um,
if that's a year 2 plan,
that's
that $200,000 is for. What would essentially be. Fire Department Building Committee, Emergency Services, whatever the acronym is, which we fought about forever, and
Yeah.
I made it against my will, I just want to say Fire Department Building Committee, but anyway. Anyways, so I think that 200,000, if you take that out and spend it from the top, from line 3, eventually, when you figure out your plans. There you go. You see what I'm saying? So it's that,
no, sorry, I lost you at
Yeah.
some point along the way there.
so. That money is for like. Surveying property and figuring out where fire stations go and where they can go, and the line 3 is most of what we're gonna be spending money on for town buildings. Coming up as fire departments and where they go and how to build them at different places. So if you take out that 200,000, then, you know. You save off that line 3 and you can. You see what
Alternatively,
I don't know what, I don't know how to explain it better, I'm sorry.
well, I mean, I think if you were to remove that from the budget. That wouldn't preclude them from getting money, they would have to go in front of the board of finance.
Yep. And then the board of finance is gonna
Well, they still.
ask for requests that's gonna either the
Yeah.
general fund,
Yes,
which is the other avenue. For that. And that still is greater than Pete's, it's 200,000, but that reduces that balance to 500, 600 versus. It would reduce the transfer in line 3 in year 1 by $200,000, or by 170,000 if we want to actually cover. The shortage.
And they already have 160 increment on top of that. Right?
They do, they have, well, that, yes, plus the 40,000 that they're spending for the. First step of the station location study, so they have 200,000, they have 160 left.
And then they were requesting in year 2 is another 200,000
Correct, that's the 200,000
that he's talking about.
that we're talking about, yeah.
Right. Just
The other consideration, I brought it up before, is that.
other note 10.
Well, no, I'm actually talking the next line down, that note payment. The design costs and everything could also conceivably just be roped into that total project cost as a line item, meaning there wouldn't be any separate engineering surveying, it would be a bonded project. That covers planning, design, fees, all of that stuff as a part of the bonded project, so we're the way the
Yeah,
school.
so you basically, yeah, you could take that out. Really, they could use 160 for, that's what I'm gonna do.
That's my thought. But again, I want you guys to be comfortable with it too, because we talked about this a lot.
Well, I
And
think if the emergency
Yeah.
services building committee was to go to the Board of Finance with a solid request as far as like a project or a bill or a payment that needs to be made, I think that's the way to go.
Can I make a brief suggestion? We've got 3 members of that building committee, 4 members. Stuart, are you on that committee?
I'm an alternate.
You're an alternate, but Ralph and Pete and Mike are all online. Yeah, I'm wondering how, if they've been following this and what they think about it. Ralph? You're up. If you're there, Ralph.
Why
Hi.
me? What did I do to deserve this?
Well, you did something to me in the past and I'm getting revenge and I don't
Vice chair
remember
or
what.
something.
Co-chairman or whatever he is.
Yeah, you get the highest rank, Ralph, so you get the job.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right. Anyway. I've kind of followed the conversation, and I'm not sure what I can add to this without having a conversation with the entire committee. I think that Mr. Marshall's thoughts about bundling design costs and perhaps some of the engineering that would be necessary to develop a design and bundling that into a bond. Obviously, you would you'd incur some costs at least to create and sell that bond. I don't know what those numbers would be, but to take the 200,000 and push it off, maybe that can work. I don't know. I would really like the entire committee's input, and Mike has been listening, I'm sure. And maybe he can chime in with his thoughts, and Peter as well.
Mike,
Gentlemen. If
I'm
you're
here.
willing.
do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think it's hard to give an answer as to what I think this committee we're talking about would support without having a meeting of that committee.
Yeah,
and having
exactly.
them tell us what they want us to say. But putting that aside for a moment, I have been following the conversation, and there certainly has been a lot of discussion about sort of these all interrelated projects here. And it is, there certainly is 160 left of the currently set aside 200 that is, should allow a certain amount of this work by the committee to keep on keeping on. And so would the loss of that 200 have an immediate impact? I don't think so. I can't represent the committee's opinion on that, but certainly from just a basic math point of view, the 160 that remains is a lot of funding to continue the process. And it's really just a matter of, do we have other money set aside to help dull the blow of the larger expense, or is it just too important right now to reduce the hit on the current budget to make it palatable to the taxpayers ultimately, which is what really only matters. And then we just have to look at that 200 needing to go back in at some point if there is a project that needs that $200 included in it. So I guess it's kind of a rehash of what everyone else is just saying.
Pete, do you have anything to add?
Sure, can you hear me?
Just barely.
I'll try and
There's
speak up.
some feedback or something.
Any better?
A little bit.
Okay,
No,
great.
no.
I would agree with what both Ralph and Mike were saying, and would also kind of reach back to what some of the points Pete made earlier, that if the shock absorber funds that right now are dedicated seemingly to the school project are also available to backstop the fire building committee, I think that kind of flexibility would go a long way. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your
We have
time.
money in there for both of them, separate.
Mhm. Separate, yeah,
I mean, this plan.
that, you know, I essentially see that as line 3 and 4.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, could I
That's
just
right.
add one more comment on this topic?
Yeah, certainly, Mike.
I'm not sure it matters at this point in the process, but if I just would like to point out that originally was a request from Willington Hill. So technically in the process, what you're really proposing is to wash out the request from Willington Hill if you're proposing to eliminate that 200. Again, I think the similar sensibility still applies. But just sort of procedurally, that was a request from Willington Hill, so that, I don't know if that matters in anyone's minds, but so maybe just a clarification.
I appreciate that, Mike. It was a similar, we did the same thing last year, essentially.
With the other 200,000 that we're talking about, yes.
The initial 200,000, so with precedent, I was kind of less concerned. It's really just the dollar value. But good point and good clarification. So
Thank you.
thank you, Mike. Thank you, all of you. All right, so I'm gonna posit what I'm hearing is that it sounds like we might want to try to remove the 200,000 in year 2.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yes,
Yes. Does that help us in year 1?
it does.
It does.
The only, one question I would like to ask Donna, though, is given the revenue presentation last week at Board of Finance, it sounded like, your expectation is that reserves will be somewhat anemic. Because, you know, we talked about the applied balance for this year's budget, it's lower than it's been, I don't know, in the last 5 years, it sounds like, the projection anyway. So, I'm, wondering if we would have the Board of Finance would have the wherewithal to deal with a request that's unbudgeted money. Or something like, oh, now the, you know, the Emergency Services Building Committee has got some real needs and they wanna get going and no one wants to delay that. Do we have the flexibility? If we, you know, to do that?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
I know it's general, I'm hoping that actually tomorrow night, that there's some, that you can firm up some of the stuff from the revenue report, because, you know, so we understand your math on configuring all that. All those numbers, because I think it's gonna be hard for the Board of Finance to wrestle this down without, understanding, particularly with the reval, what the real impact is and what some of the factors would be in the, budget calculator, you know? So I don't know if there's anything that can be added tomorrow night, but that would certainly help me, because right now I feel like there's some unknowns that we don't normally have at this stage in the budget year, and I know some of that's because of the grand list and other things, but in a reval year, you know.
I'm gonna tell you what I just did.
Keep that
So
up.
I removed the 200,000. For line 11 in year 2. I reduced, and we can play with the shifting the numbers between lines 3 and 4 however we want. What I did was I took $160,000 off of line 3 in year 1. What that does, it leaves us $10,000. In Fund 04 after all the year 2 projects. Meaning, we were 32,000, give or take, shy of covering the year 2 projects previously. So with the updated numbers. This is what it does. We have a
What does
starting
that make it
balance on the,
six?
so what that'll do is it leaves a starting balance in year 2 of 942,291, and then we're spending 932,500. So we're putting more money in year 2, obviously, for whatever we ultimately say we need to spend in year 3. But we've at least covered the projects in year 1 with the year one funds initially. We can put the 200 back. That covers what we're showing you to.
Can we just take the 200,000 out of the plan entirely, or do we have to move it? I mean, if someone put a request in for that, wouldn't we need to at least represent it somewhere, or can?
That is a good question.
We have taken line items completely out of,
Before.
not to ones that are that big, but we have taken other projects that have not been approved, so to speak, by CIP and simply taken them off the plan where the department can re-request it the following year. Unless you plan to fund it, say in year 3. But at
The
that point,
project's already gone.
but you plan to fund that 200,000 in year 3, and how are you gonna pay for it there?
I just
Well-
was wondering what the mechanism was, so do we like let them know that it was taken off the plan, or?
We can follow up with the formal, based on where things stand in the capital plan, that we haven't captured the 200,000, but it can be reassessed next year.
Yeah,
In this case, we're not losing a line because it was just another 200,000 that we were showing.
I mean, one of the things about the firehouse, it sounds like we're talking about kind of a, you know, philosophical choice to sort of, you know, have Board of Finance deal with requests as things arise to keep that moving forward. Realizing we're probably not gonna need 200 grand all at once in 1 year, so until it gets off and running. But one of the things to me that's missing about that project is, unlike the schools, they haven't hit the QA&M stage yet. They haven't, the numbers are, I haven't seen anyway, any plans and the numbers are
It's still
round and projected. And so how long, and I know that the study will shed light on what the committee discusses and what ends up happening. So then the action could pick up and be more specific. But right now, and I think some of that, you know, the 200,000 was going to help with some of that projecting better and getting more professional, you know, numbers on the table, because I feel like that process is way behind from where the schools are at this point. Because we've done a process over the last 5 years, 6 years with the schools, and we kind of know what the deal is.
And the fire departments have suddenly become.
Yeah, it's coming, and they're kind of both at the same time, the way
Right.
timing is working out, so.
Well, once again.
So it'll help us when that, you know, after that study's done and when there is some movement.
Mhm.
I'm pretty comfortable being on the Board of Finance, hearing stuff as it arises that's needed. I'd much rather spend money on something future oriented like that than I would on fixing mold or, you know, air systems and things that, you know, in crumbling, or not crumbling, but you know, dilapidated old buildings that we're using now, so.
Oh, crap.
So, yeah, so that's the thing that gets exciting about CIP, is that it's actually constructive and it's about the future, so I think it's why this is.
Just as a point of reference, so that $160,000 debt reduction gets us to $2,127,163 would be your one level spending bill. Down from whatever this said on my printed sheet in February.
228.7, 228, 287.
2287, what is it down to?
$2,127,163. I do not know what the percentage is because I.
Yeah.
You mean year over year?
Yeah.
You want me to figure?
Yeah, I think I'd still be more comfortable around one.
I'm not saying we're done.
All right.
I also don't personally think we're gonna get down to 1.8. I can't personally support it, what we decide to do. Because I don't think it does. Again, I think we need to pay for the bills that we're saying are gonna be on the table. Because next year, we may have to fund a fire station way sooner, and we're not gonna be able to take on a recurring payment and then transfer any to capital reserve. You know, that's my concern with this is, again, pushing things off too much. That said. The only other place, is there anything in year one? Not that it matters. No, we did a good job in year one.
Yeah,
21%, 22 if you round up,
Yeah,
increase from,
so year over year from 2 years ago, that's the 10% year over year from 2 years ago as it stands, just. But
would you say
again,
22,
21?
21?
well, 21.6.
All right, so 22, so it's about 20%.
Yeah.
Over 2 years ago, it would be 10% per
Three,
year.
that's the, I'm not saying this is where we stop, but
All right.
the only other place I can see is again, lines 18 and 19. It would add $110,000 to the fund balance. Available, which could reduce our need to transfer in.
Well, I think it's important for, since Chief Snyder's on the, agenda to talk about fund transfers and we're also presenting at the same Board of Finance meeting. It's probably appropriate to talk about it.
Well, we've talked about it, I think, multiple times at this point. We need to approve, we need to have, like, ideally, I think it's prudent for us to have an approved plan to go before. To be able to present the Board of Finance. So if that means keeping it on here, if that's what people are comfortable with, and that's what we do. I personally think we should pull them. Because I think there again, it's tied up for an unknown project. The same argument that we just had for the other thing.
Donna, what is your take on that situation?
I agree with James, we should pull it. We should take it off the plan.
We should close.
We should close them. I felt that way from the very beginning of the CIP budget process. Those should be closed down and we should move on.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask clarity which item you're talking about?
The 110,000, Mike, that was sitting there for survey engineering or survey.
Right.
In
In a previous year's budget.
In a
Right.
previous year's
Yes.
budget, that was never
Start.
never started.
In a way, it's related to the 200,000. It was when we set up the emergency services, that 110 was supposed to be applied to the 200,000. Wellington one was supposed to put like about whatever 70-80,000 they had. That I don't think ever got applied.
No, that I believe we're conflating different things here.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, the 110 is an earlier request from Wellington Hill Fire Department previous to the existence of the building committee. And
Right.
it is, I will again bring up what I have brought up repeatedly during these meetings. It is not within the purview of CIP to reach back to money that's already been approved by the taxpayers in an existing budget and wipe out the project. The Wellington Hill Fire Department can, or maybe even should or should not, reach out to Donna if they feel the project's closed and ask Donna to close the project. That's the process. Or they can talk about it in Board of Finance tomorrow night also. But it is not the purview of CIP to reach back to old money and say, we've decided this project is over, clear it out.
With all due respect, Mike, Fund 04 projects require specific approval as an individual project at town meeting. That never happened. There is no project. It has not been approved by the town. It is just a line item in the plan. And if I'm wrong, Donnie,
Regardless, it is not the CIP's purview. It is not in your authority to reach back to previous money. You are from here forward.
it is in our purview to close out a project that has been sitting or that we do not feel is an applicable project, and I will.
No, it is absolutely not.
All right, with all due respect,
Jim, I've
Mike,
been on CIP. I've been Board of Finance Chairman. We've been over this over and over again. The CIP committee has no fiscal authority.
correct.
It
and
is
this
a
isn't
planning
fiscal-
committee.
no fiscal commitment, because the project has not been approved.
It is
So with
a
all due
planning
respect-
committee.
With all due respect, Mike, I think we've had this discussion numerous times. I can only act on the information provided by our business manager. who says that we can close that project because it has not been approved as an individual project at town meeting.
However,
That
it
is
was
the
approved
position
in
I
a
take.
budget by the townspeople. Yeah, it was approved in a budget in the CIP plan. It was not allocated. You are correct.
Thank you, Mike. Okay,
So, know that Tom Snyder sent me an email and said we'd like to leave it open for 1 more year.
okay. Well, this is new news. I could have used that
Yeah.
5 minutes ago, Don.
Yeah, and I think too, we talked about doing one or the other, but I don't know that we need to remove both.
I'm just
Right
looking
now.
at where we're at for our fund balances.
Yeah, me too.
And again, I would strongly think that that is a prudent course of action, when we're looking at our first selectman on the committee saying that he wants to get down to a much lower number. I don't see any other way of doing that funds our projects in year 2.
So Jim, respectfully, that's a great comment to make tomorrow night at the Board of Finance meeting where they have the authority to tell the Wilmington Hill Fire Department that. Or to make a decision, or to order it, or to tell Don to close it.
Well, apparently that's, Donna, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they have any purview in it. If they're not authorizing it, correct? Meaning it's just a recommendation from the Board of Finance to suggest they close it out. If you're saying the only way we can close out that project, which is the approval of the Wilmington Hill Fire Department. How does that ever get closed? If they. I'll let it linger.
That's a very good question.
Okay, I don't know, it's an acceptable answer.
You don't know the answer.
That is an acceptable answer.
So when we go. In whatever iteration we go to the Board of Finance tomorrow. I understand the need for an improved plan, but I think this 110,000 that's sitting here is an important chunk of money. To do something important for the town with. The conversation, though. I feel like needs to be, I'm repeating myself, I've already said it twice. Tom Snyder's on the agenda for Board of Finance tomorrow. That is the place where it should happen.
Yeah, we can talk about it then. Well, with that said, I mean, given that new information that I don't think we apparently can't do anything. So there is no motion, so we don't have that, we don't have that as an opportunity. So. What else do you guys want to do to reduce this, or is 1.127 or 2.127163 our local spending target for year 1? Our local spending total in year 1. We have a 640,000 transfer to town project, $1 million transfer to school projects. So. What additional, Dan, I'll kind of follow up on your earlier statement. What do you see? Do you have any other potential reductions? Do you think we reduce the transfer further? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just.
Well, I talked about it, so I should be on the spot. I mean, I think we need to do a hard look at the transfers and. In order to get this. To the Board of Finance and have a thoughtful conversation about it, I do think that we should keep careful track of what we've done to reduce the budget.
Okay.
And I think if we, in good faith. Take some of the, transfer out, even though we know it's the right thing to do to fund it. And then. Again, I'm repeating myself, I apologize for that, but on the off season, have a conversation about how we as a committee manage budget season next year. Because it's gross to do that. It's gross to not fund the future of this town. But I don't want. other boards or committees taking a hacksaw to the budget either.
There's one other thing that I would bring up, and that is, I'm not, I'm not sure how firm the 80,000 figure for the library is on the gutters on the back.
It's low SIP, it doesn't help us.
What's that?
It's low SIP, it doesn't help us.
Okay. Well, it doesn't help us with the budget, but
Correct, well, yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
true,
what
it may
we're
have, it may have a positive, you know, it may get.
I just didn't, I didn't get the feeling from that, that that's a firm number or whatever, and, and
I agree.
okay, okay, so you're kind of putting it in a different part of your head,
Yes.
and I understand
And I
that.
get that, and we can, we have low SIP dollars to spend, and we don't have any other projects from low SIP that could take it, so.
I'm just
it
looking
doesn't
like,
impact- It doesn't impact our budget.
yeah, there's not much in,
So, but
Yeah.
the kind of caveat on, or to follow along on Jen's, you know, discussion, the place to reduce that is line 4.
And
640 covers
and my
down.
suggestion on line 4 was that because we had the extra, not extra. Because we added the 375 last year for the roof project. Because it was time sensitive, we are still over. You look at the 3-year average, or the 3 years transfer, and it's now at 330. $3,375,000 over 3 years, whereas on the plan it was 3 million. So we are, even though to fund in good faith at $1 million a year, we're over that already. And I think that's where we should probably take it to show that, you know, this plan means something. And that when we say $1 million, we don't mean $1.5 million. Or $1,375,000.
yeah, but once again, I think that action on the school buildings, and as Jim pointed out, you know, we may need to do, regardless of what happens there, we may need to do that project that was queued up
Right,
sooner rather than later.
well, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
that's the argument on the fire department,
Well,
so an
not-
argument on a lot of things.
But the other point, Pete, is that shock absorber was step 1. It
I know.
wasn't the entirety.
It's a
understand.
savings
goal was
I
to
understand, but
increase
that was how
And I get
the
that.
project was sold to me at the beginning. Back when I was on Board of Finance, it's $1 million a year is a big hit. And so I said, all right, we can go for $1 million a year now, but you can't. You know, we don't act like Darth Vader and say, you know, that was the decision, pray I don't change it again. You know, that's just not the way to do things. You gotta. The thing in looking at a 5-year plan and having a 5-year plan is that you don't change it in year 2 and then say, I don't care what I changed in year 2. You know, in year 3, we're gonna.
I'm
Sorry,
I see both sides of it, I don't disagree, I don't know where I personally stand on it, I haven't made up my mind. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on what that number, what the.
I don't want to carve into it because that's the savings part of the plan. The plan has savings, the plan has spending. That's the savings part of it. And I feel like it's one of those things that when we start with bonding and do some of that stuff and then that kicks in, we're gonna be
in a world.
most, well, not if we leave it alone.
Yeah, but see.
No, we're gonna be,
And
we're gonna be much better.
Right, and I
able to
hear you,
handle it.
Stephanie,
Yeah,
but. We're not only doing the savings as opposed to the. Action on this plan, but we're doing the savings as opposed to the operations for the whole town as well. Because all of this plan is part of the bigger plan, and so we have to get that bigger plan passed to get this plan passed.
and Pete,
and
that's because the firehouses joined the rush in a more aggressive way.
Right,
And
Well,
they started,
more needed,
and they
right.
set up you set up the
Right.
committee, that's new. So, you know, I
Well,
don't think it's,
that's new because.
it's not
I
reasonable to
wasn't
say, oh, well,
expecting,
the schools don't need
my
it
fire
now,
trucks to be
you know.
outside. You know, I had, when. That happened just before I took the job and I felt I needed to do something.
Melissa, any thoughts?
Uh, pretty much a lot that's already been said. So nothing actually new that
So,
hasn't already been said.
anybody else in the room? We have two avenues we can go on this. My thought is we can either leave this as it is. Understanding that any cuts that the Board of Finance decides to make that hit CIP. Are going to come from the school side. And say we feel the 1 million, we feel as a group that we think the 1 million is important. As a long-term planning scenario, we feel it's valid to keep it flat. The other option is we could reduce and pick it up with a number in the background that we think is as low as. Where we want to see this be. The other option is we just pick that number now. And the likelihood, I think, is that it will probably be discussed at nauseam at Board of Finance as well, during their deliberations and. Potentially even further reduced, hopefully not, but if there's a number that we want to live with, this is the time to kind of get there. If it's not where we're at right now.
What's the total increase at right now? Currently, after all our other discussions.
Let me get the right. Oh, shoot. No. Sorry, spreadsheet just jumped on me. Give me a second.
Wait, the number you just put in there or no?
Equals this minus this. $377,561 increase.
Say that again, please.
$377,561 is the increase this year. All right. From last year's 1,749,000.
Yes.
Well, that's what I have in there. Which I pulled from last year's plan, so I'm pretty sure that's in the neighborhood of accurate. Okay.
Last year,
Yes.
Yeah. Last year, yeah, the year before that was like $30,000 higher, or I don't know, I forget the number honestly, but I can look it up. But there was a slight decrease down to the 1,749 the year before.
That's an important trend. To have as part of the discussion tomorrow.
Where is that one now?
Oh, I just did that.
Oh, you just
It's-
did it.
It's subtracting line 77. Row column. A. It's subtracting column G from K. However, we reduced the number.
Okay, yeah. Oh, the one that I just figured the percentage on.
Yes, so
Okay.
it's a $377,561 increase from that 1,749,000. And that percentage you said was
21.6.
Yeah.
21.6%.
so. Yeah, 21.6. So, and that's the challenge with percentages versus.
So,
So, it's.
Yeah, no.
It's a tough.
I'd like to throw out a number.
I'd like to throw out a lot of them.
Yeah. So. I figure if we go for $100,000 increase over last year, that's about, what, an 8 or 9% increase. And then that means there's, about $378,000 that we gotta find. Divide by 2, you take 139,000 off of line 3 and 139 off of line 4. And that still gives us significantly more than last year on line 3, and we're still above 3 million on line 4 for 3 years.
But again, we don't fund the projects we have slated in year 2. if we take anything further off of line 3. Then we are
All
not.
right, well, then we're gonna have.
I appreciate that, you know,
Yeah, I'm trying-
I know, but that's where I struggle with it, because
All right, so
these are your 2 projects.
And that's not gonna get ahead in capital, because that's about 5.5%.
well, if you take,
Increase.
oh, no, I went 377, it should be, 277. So if you take
No, I'm just
two
kinda
seventy-seven
looking.
off of line 4, we're still above the 3 million, and we don't have to take anything off of line 3. Just, putting that out there.
I'm gonna ask a silly question.
You can ask all the silly questions you want, because I do.
We're gonna spend $500,000 in engineering the Schofield in 1 year.
I believe so. And I thought that number was incredibly high, and I was told,
First shot.
yeah.
No, I mean.
I know,
Once you hit the state road, that's where.
No, I
That's where it
more
is.
thinking, it's a phase project, it's more of a cash flow thing, right?
Right,
Like, I
but-
believe the project will cost $500,000 to design. it.
Right,
I'm just
but
wondering if
The,
it's.
Design
all
phase
the,
one.
all phases of the design have to be designed up front to make sure they fit together.
Yeah, no.
And it includes, federal waterways, wetlands, state roads.
I'm just.
It's in,
I was optimistic that maybe.
I was optimistic too when I asked what the
contract.
engineering was, and I thought it was gonna be, $70,000-$80,000, and I'm told 500, and I had chest pain radiating up my left arm. Should have called the guys.
Well, when we talked a few years ago, I don't know, Stu, when was it, we talked about being aggressive about growing the amount of spending in CIP, or amount of money in CIP, because it can't be at the usual year-over-year budget percentage rate. Can't be like 5%. The goal then was 10%. You know,
Yeah.
so we're below that in this idea.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean,
10% would be $174,000 increase, so we'd have to kill $203,000.
there you go, you take the 203 off of line 4, and we're still above 3 million by 100 and something thousand, and
850 for line 3, right? That'd be.
yeah.
We get close to 10%, it just a straight 10% increase from last year. At 800, honestly. Right now, we got, what is it we need to get done, sorry.
Yeah, but again, we're taking it out of savings to cushion, not
Yeah.
out of spending. So
I agree,
and that was a different idea, and that came after the 10% overall in spending to have it reflect. So I think we're mushing those 2 ideas together there.
I feel like we should go with a number in our head. I think we should keep it the way it is. And be able to have a reasonable conversation about the deliberations we've had, and why we strongly feel that we should keep it where it's at.
I have to agree with Jen on this. I think we should go
Yeah,
in
so-
with this number and then see if, what they say.
So just for point of reference, the Jen's comment about putting in the back of our head, cutting $200,000 off of line 4, the $800,000 for the school is a 10.14% increase from last year. Which is which is our target. I again think the increase because we lost ground last year. I think it's important to save. but at the same time, that would. Be the limit I'd even be able to get to, and vote. On the
It's,
plan.
it's completely nuts for us to go in. I'm arguing with myself, I realize that, because this is a different comment than I made earlier in the meeting, but. It seems counterintuitive for us to go into a meeting and argue for, or. Propose less money when the town is going to have to pay for it down the road and pay for it more through the notes. For the school stuff, because it's whatever happens, whatever school project. Happens, it's gonna need to get funded, and the whole point is for us to be mindful about putting money away so that that's not such a dramatic impact, and. It's hard to rationalize reducing that so that we can get to a percentage. I understand why that's an exercise, but, I think I just talked myself out of my.
No, I mean, I think it's distinctly different. It's savings, not spending. So, yes, it gets us to a number, but it doesn't. Did you say 10.4, 10.04?
10.14, that's in total local spending.
Yeah,
What I am figuring out right now is reducing that. So that is a 30, so that's a $34,000 increase in transfer reserve fund from last year. So. It is a 2.4%, the annual transfer to capital reserve is a 2.4% increase from last year. Even though our local spending is 10%, but we are not saving. It's the point, we're not getting anywhere near the 10%,
spending,
increase in
investing in capital, yeah.
investing in capital, we're spending more, we're increasing the expenditures faster than we're increasing the saving. In doing that. So.
I'd like to leave it as is. I mean, one thing that hasn't happened is the Board of Finance hasn't really looked at. I mean, they haven't discussed thoughts about savings budget wide, and I'm talking about not just the selectmen's budget, but transfer outs, the school, everything else, So.
So you're talking about still moving the 200,000 out, but everything else the same?
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
the emergency services?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, moving that out,
it puts us,
are we reducing that one number from 800 to 640 or not?
yes, that would be,
That too.
that's, yes,
So-
so. The changes from your plan,
200,000 out, yeah.
the 200,000 comes out in year 2 for the emergency on line 11. Year 1, line 3 becomes $640,000. That is all we've done today. But in line 4, it's sitting at $1 million currently. And that is what did I say that was? So as it stands. I don't know what that increase is.
And by the way, that's the same issue.
Okay.
Taking the 200 out, which is really 160 net, is what we took off the line 3. So that's the same move there.
So it's a 2.4% increase in transfer this year. It's a 10.14% increase in total spending. For this year. And, oh, sorry. It's not a 2.4% increase. Trying to figure out what that number is, we should 200,000 on it, so it's. It is a 16.78% increase over last year from. Transfer to reserve fund. Which. Beats the 10.14% increase in spending.
What was it?
16.78 as it stands currently with the 1 million for the schools, the 640,000 for the Now, that is a 16.78% increase in savings. Transferred to your capital reserve. Savings. The increase in spending is 10.14%, so we're saving 6% more this year than we're spending. It's something.
Yeah,
If we pull. Down to if we pull out the 200,000, it becomes a 2.4% increase in spending, in savings. Compared to the same 10.14% increase in spending, so we're falling farther behind. And that's. Really the only thing I don't think we can. Do. Is fall farther behind. So I think with that, I'm comfortable personally the way it is, with these changes. We are most. We can make a motion to discuss, or we can just make sure everybody's.
Well, we've been discussing for 2 hours.
I mean,
so-
Is everybody good with that?
Well,
We'll make a motion.
I'm good with that.
All right, I'll make the motion. I'm gonna move that. Do I have to do this as amended? Based on the change, if we approve the plan based on the change we approved tonight? Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move that the CIP committee approves the 2026 to 2020 to 2030. CIP plan, capital improvement program plan. As modified tonight. For presentations. To the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
Second.
All, any,
Wait, is everyone clear on what those amendments are? You just kind of went over it, but I just want to be sure before we call the vote.
for the official discussion on the, while the motion is made, it was, line 3, the annual transfer to local funds, for town projects, $640,000 in year 1. And in year 2, line 11, the Emergency Services Facilities Building Committee funding, $200,000 from Fund 04 has been removed from the plan. Those are the only changes. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstention?
I abstain.
Roll call it is. All right. Peter,
I abstain.
Stu,
I,
Jeremy. You don't get to vote, sorry. I'm an aye.
Aye.
I,
Melissa?
Aye.
All right. So that is 8 ayes, 1 abstention. And 0 nays.
Does she need to know who?
Peter Tanaka is the abstention, everybody else is an aye.
Okay, and Christina's not here, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for having the tough discussions. And getting to this first stage. All right, sorry, I love my agenda and all that.
We'll hear. Got my notes in there, but
Oh, so we'd already moved up to plan development through the improvement plan. All right, so 7B, I apologize, I never got a call out to you guys about next week's meeting if we need it. The 26th is. Whatever they're calling it, the arts night at Hall.
I will not be here.
Yes, I will not be able to make it as
are
well,
you with
so
that?
we will be canceling
Arts
the
night.
26th meeting, we have 2
Oh,
approaches
thank
on.
God, because.
It's the music.
So we have 2 approvals on this, should we
Yeah, I
need to
know.
meet again, depending on where the Board of
He was
Finance
talking about
goes,
that last
if they
Arts Gala.
ask us to evaluate.
Arts
further
Gala,
changes.
yeah.
We can either wait and see if that happens tomorrow night, or
Yeah.
we can try to find a date.
I think that would be the best move, wait and see what happens.
So we'll have to call a special meeting at some
Yes.
point. In all likelihood. When are your deliberations done on Board of Finance stuff?
Well, they should start tomorrow night, and, they go through, let me just, I mean, it kind of depends, they go the 20th, the 27th. And then the spillover date that's unscheduled, but in the back pocket is April 3rd.
Then
So,
there's. Oh, I don't have it on this calendar.
All right, so. Conceptually, I mean, they may be moving to do something on a plan by the 27th, but, maybe earlier this week. I will follow up as expeditiously as possible once we get word tomorrow night on how the discussion goes. I would encourage everybody to attend tomorrow night that are able and listen to the discussion and participate and advocate for how you feel the plan should be relayed. I will do my best. To at least talk through and explain how we got to where we are, but that moves on to the second to last item on our agenda is what are our priorities for our discussion at length. I can relatively confidently speak to where we stood and why we held what we had based on the discussion we had. So I think we did our work as part of the discussion. Is there anything else anybody really wants to make a point to relay?
I just wanna kind of, because this is a new model this year, we're really intensively meeting. Which is good, and we started early
Board of
and,
Finance,
no, CIP.
CFP.
CIP schedule is much more aggressive than it's ever been.
Well, we started.
So, maybe, yeah, so, but I guess for going forward, I kind of like some clarity on what the pace is. In the olden days, we just met intensively, you know, to prepare the plan, and then we kind of went into you know, a little bit of hibernation, and then, you know, came up again as the budget year came forward. We also had done site visits in the last few. Christina started that, and that's really good. So I guess what I want to do is kind of get a sense, are we recommending, or do people feel like we should meet monthly through the year until the gear up? Because
That's what we have set for calendar days.
monthly and then,
Currently.
okay, monthly, and then which Wednesday is it in the month? Do you remember?
I want to say the third ones. Yeah, I have it. I can check.
That's the,
I'll
yeah,
resend
that'll
it.
bump up.
I think we
against-
decided to take the April meeting off, given the aggressiveness of the schedule and the fact that we'll be in referendum. And,
Yeah, right.
so we're not up again until May. Oh, sorry, I have too many things here now.
The 21st is the third Wednesday.
Meeting schedule approved, here we go. All right. Rest of the year, everyone's second Wednesday of the month. I'm glad you asked that question because I was wrong.
Okay,
So May 14th. That is through December. That we can kind of forward load a little better next year, so that we start. These are discussions for our May meeting and onward as how we kind of shift the schedule, so it's not as aggressive and also not as tight as the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, you know, budget approval needs, amongst other things.
I think it might be a good exercise to schedule one of those meetings. If we can have a joint meeting with at least Board of Finance to talk about philosophies and kind of, you know, what our plan is for the budget season.
Yep.
So it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I'll reach out with ideas for agendas. Once we get through.
Yes, let's just get there.
Once we get through this budget season. I appreciate any flexibility you guys have in coordinating a meeting next week as we need it, as a special meeting. All right, we're good. I'm gonna stop talking. Any other comments before we move on to President Speak? No? All right, President Speak. Nobody in the room. Everybody online, just identify yourself. You've already had tonight, but we'll do it again. Go ahead, Pete. Peter, you got feedback. We're not hearing you. All right. Pete, I'm gonna ask you to hold on and hope we'll get you back. Anybody else? Nobody else, Pete, it's you. You got
Another shot.
another shot. You're muted currently.
Well, he went up, did he?
No, just lower his hand. Be lower his hand.
Oh,
Sorry, Pete, I'm sure we'll see you tomorrow. All right, well, that's it. Do I have a motion? to
Yes,
adjourn?
you do a move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Peter, seconded by Jen, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.
good night,
And thank you,
Melissa.
gentlemen online.
Bye, Melissa.
Night,
Melissa.
night.